Yeah.
You didn't have a date with my cousin. There's not.
We had a teacher.
So, this is.
My brain is mush, as not always to be. My brain is always mush by the last session, which is normally I can sit and just
Someone else has to leave.
let it be.
You're right back.
Did you get Jose second?
This is.
There never
It's
Sorry?
EduGen Dialogues.
Oh, I'm in the wrong place.
Oh, well then,
No, it just isn't.
in the world, there's.
Oh, okay, you're not saying. Okay, wait.
I went to
Section. I was in section 5. Oh, okay.
anywhere else, no call.
I think this was.
Yeah,
Exactly.
By the way. Guarantee a copy.
Sounds interesting.
Searching for the
I'll just keep showing up.
You know what? Data. My mouse created like a long voice. That's how we're trying to accomplish, you know, we're smarter. We're all getting smarter along this day. Dumber.
It's hard to get fired. More jobs.
That's what I always hear about this.
You know what I mean? With the creation.
Oh, yeah. But also sometimes really bad students.
Yes.
Some people in university and
Somebody
Oh,
else.
yeah.
should not.
I didn't care. Not at all.
It's definitely.
I think I remember that. I had the original. I was on Twitter. But it's big. That's the whole big once you're off, they don't. Over years, they let them do teacher like that. Otherwise, you guys good teacher. That was him.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. This is like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had a really crappy.
Did get fired.
So we regular.
When I was in
Well, you can do it.
We were gonna talk about this tomorrow, but since you guys, and I even dropped some of my nail on the floor, and I'm still around. Before we kick off, I am gonna say, the goal here is definitely to actually have a conversation, so if you wanna move to a place where you're kind of a little. No, you don't get to be that student. I know that student.
Teachers are the worst.
We all are. So 2 hours over.
I just felt like getting closer, it makes it easier to have an actual conversation. Which is not to say you can't have a conversation across campus. We will. This is a bit of an experiment. So, all right, are we ready? We are. Just to kick it off, we're going to start off by saying, you know, the title of this conversation is EduGen Dialogues, and we recognize that what we're doing here is very limited. And so, the extreme gender pronouns, we're talking about hers and his. that leaves a lot of people out of the conversation. But both for sake of time and focus and
Lack of focus.
we made this choice. In addition, and I don't know how many of you are Daily Show fans, Cecile Richards, who is the outgoing president of Planned Parenthood, was on Daily Show this past week. And Trevor asked her, he said that white women need to be better than black women. What did that mean? She said, it's really important, just as a factual matter, for folks to know that women of color in this country are the most reliable voters. They show up to vote, and when they do vote, they vote for people who support women's health and rights. So my point in saying that was to give credit where credit's due, and to say we need to invest in women of color as candidates, as activists, and as leaders. And also, the rest of us need to be doing more. Which, first of all, is just a quote that gives me goosebumps, because yes, but also is why it was a chance for us to acknowledge that when we talk about gender, there's a lot of intersectionality that may or may not happen today, but we definitely haven't planned for intentional intersectionality, again, for either issues of race or LGBTQ communities or any of that. And to some extent, that's a failing on our part. And we just needed to acknowledge that at the beginning. So.
My name is Michael, and I have a penis.
Hi, Michael.
And my
Oh, it's gonna be good.
So my name is and
We got 10 more seconds.
And I have a uterus, and I have a cervix, and I have fallopian tubes, and I have periods. So, yeah, if you're uncomfortable,
Did you say that?
let me know.
Wait, let's do this again. My name is Michael, and I have a penis.
All right. Well, first of all, my name is Jennifer Orr, and I teach third graders in Northern Virginia. And I teach third graders in Northern Virginia. That's what I do. I have 2 daughters that may factor into some of this.
And I'm a teacher at Bloomfield High School, but more important, I'm second generation firstborn Irish male. I'm married to a woman who's put up with me in training for 40 years now. Married to 35, I think I'm 40. And when I first mentioned the session to her, I said, I'm gonna act out the role of the sexist male. And she said, you don't have to act. So, so here we are.
It's always good to have a spouse who calls you out.
Yes. That's their job.
Okay, so our goal as we started planning the session was to be thinking about issues of gender in society.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. What do you mean by gender? By gender, she means male, actually, she means male, female, not other gender.
Men and women.
Okay.
So the issues of gender within our broader society, but also issues of gender within education and what that means for us as professionals and for us with our students at all ages. So we're—
I'm sorry. We didn't agree on all ages. Well, actually, we said that we were going to do from, I thought. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. I'm sorry for interrupting. But we did discuss the ages, didn't we?
discuss a lot of things.
I'm sorry.
So whatever your context is in which you live and work, we are going to kind of look at gender. And our goal is to really have a conversation about it and to step back and look at our own beliefs and our own biases around issues of gender in society and in education.
That was very well done.
So, in case you missed
Yeah.
it, Michael practices mansplaining. So, all right, I'm gonna let you take this because Michael's been paying attention to the news lately.
This is if nobody else gets anything out of this, I've gotten a tremendous amount out of this. Even just writing letters to Jen now, short email, I can't, my frontal lobe just shuts me down because, and plus my wife, the conversation, we sit across from each other and I can do our work. So when I was talking about what I was doing with Jen, I'm getting the eye rolls and such. That just in the past week, seeing things from a different, and this is awful, a frankly, a lens, which is one of those words that still makes me itch a little bit. I started seeing all this stuff online that I just didn't see before. This is a Senate candidate from Missouri, both sides. He was not talking about Jennifer specifically, I don't think.
Sadly.
And the longer quote is a soft. I mean, it's obviously feeding his base. And then there was another quote. There was the March. Oh my God.
The right guy. In this conversation, as Doyle keeps saying, oh God, how did I not realize how sexist I was? How did I not
Well, my
realize?
wife's been talking to me. She keep calling my wife. My name is Leslie. And since I've gotten this far, it's Leslie, not Leslie, because she can't stand up with people. So hopefully I get her next year. I'm hoping Jeff will convince her that she's much smarter than me, and she does the college thing. This is another quote about the march on Washington, the Nebraska State Senator. And the reason it's the latest, I think, is safe, he's commenting on their looks. And he's a white, mostly white feminist women marching, and they're not beautiful or
Not attractive
cute,
enough
not
to be in
attractive, that's what I'm
danger.
looking for.
And this is in like the last 10 days. Public statements. These aren't emails that someone hacked and you're shocked that this is being said in private. These people are saying this, these men are saying this because A, they believe it, but also because they know it will gain them support. They know this is feeding what they're trying to feed. All right. How many of you have done the Harvard Project Implicit? A few of you. There's a Harvard, I'm looking at it saying like you should explain it, I don't know why. There's a Project Implicit out of Harvard that is an online test, I guess, for lack of a better word, that helps you look at your biases around lots of different things, and it shoots images at you and you respond. And it,
Not a race.
yes.
Yeah, that's how it started. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and in my attempts when my daughter was a little bit younger to convince her that issues of racism and sexism and ableism and all of this are so ingrained in society, and that when I take those things and I show up as racist, sexist, and ableist, it hurts, but I can also recognize it's something that's gonna be true about me and I need to fight it. But I had her take it. Like, I want you to see, it's just a part of our society, and you're gonna show up as racist or sexist or ableist. She did not. Not even remotely. She took it and she's like, look. I don't know if that gave me hope or if I'm now like, oh, I really suck. So we're gonna do it here. And you're gonna need a piece of paper. If you don't have a piece of paper, we have paper. I don't exactly. I go to workshops and people are like, fill this out with a pen. I'm like, God, I have a pen. So yes, we have paper for you. If you need pens, I can bring you pens. I have some. Where's my stuff? Oh, thank you. Before we kick off Project Implicit Educon style, I don't know that either of us made this clear. If you have thoughts, jump in. We're a small group. It's the end of an intense 2.5 days. If your brains are mush and you're like, I don't have anything to say, that's totally okay too. But do know that we can shut up and listen. I was like,
Why? She can shut up. And listen.
Yes, I can.
She won't be, like I said, get on the side.
okay, well, so you need to set up your paper with Michael on one side and Jennifer on the other
Horizontal or?
as a teacher.
Not
You need to-
Horizontal.
You just need to make a tally under. A lot, but all you're gonna make are tally marks. So I don't think you need that much space.
You want to
Let me
explain?
tell the left.
What size mark?
What did you ask me?
Everything a particular way.
He wants to know the margin size.
You can't both be on the left.
Right? What's the smallest font I can use? What's the biggest I can use?
How many words?
This already comments.
start, Michael and Jennifer. We're gonna flash words at you, and all you're gonna do is tally which one of us you think that might describe. Jeff, I'm not gonna know which words you tallied where.
Oh, I just wasn't afraid, but now I am.
You looked uncomfortable.
I'm just thinking I'm certain bias.
It's a 3.5 hour drive home.
You want to turn this into me? I know your handwriting, so.
No, we're not leaving it out.
We got some letters back there.
We're not looking.
So we're just gonna flash them for a couple of seconds. This is not something we want you to spend a lot of time thinking about. The way the Project Implicit Tested Hardware works is it flashes it fast.
It's really fast.
You're hitting the keyboard there, however, which doesn't require you to really look down. Here, you might need to be looking at where you're tallying, so it won't be quite as rapid fire. So these are just gonna be some describing words, and I just plan on stand between you all the words. All right, are you ready?
And this has been tested and researched and we've done the control, so. Trust me, I got this.
This comes from the
What a great t-shirt.
That would be a great t-shirt, actually.
Educon 2018.
Amal, can you design that? The t-shirt that says, "Trust me, I've got a penis."
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You ready? Here we go.
Okay.
Oh, are we ready?
We have one more slide.
You didn't tell me to put that slide.
Yeah. All right, here we go. If you miss one, it's all good. Just quick.
So far, I'm winning.
There enough for the border if you're wondering about how long you have.
Sorry. Sorry, there's a right answer on that one.
But you don't have to share.
Not talking about my sweater.
Can you change this to go back and forth?
Yes. As long as the have to do that.
You can kind of look at where things kind of go for you. No.
Got that front a little bit more. We went to SEC, it did end up 50-50. If it didn't, or if there's any particular words that struck you. It's interesting, this one, just making of this. Yeah, I mean, I pick things and some of the words, like, I'm we're probably at the same BMI, I would guess. So I was curious what people did with that. And then independent. And then some of them are obviously words that we use, girls versus boys. And we use it even though we didn't, and not for this I come in for them. So that's what the folks say. We want to see what people did, which way, and pick the words that you want to talk about.
And having to do it with the two of us kind of skews the idea of the gender, especially if by chance you don't either of us. But it made it a little bit funnier and a little bit more fun to do. But you can kind of now step back and look at it through that lens of, we had said, male, female, how does that play out?
So I had another project that also gave you images.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. No, it's
Did the images change?
yeah, they change it in a way that you do one way. If you think you can game it, it's interesting because they catch you. You know you're caught in the middle. Like, damn it! No, no racist.
Yes.
So
I guess just from my experience right now, I felt it to be kind of awkward because I usually don't know. And
that's fine.
it was, at least it was awkward for me to look at a descriptive adjective about buying.
Yes.
That
And make it an assumption about the two of us.
yeah,
Yes.
it was very awkward.
And I would have actually guessed that it was less awkward for you than for those who do know us, but maybe I was wrong about that. Which is an interesting thing for me to try to step out and think about. So were there words that really struck you, or what do you say, DJ?
Mostly the body image words struck me a lot because as we were going through that list, I was starting to think, are there more words that describe female bodies than there are male bodies?
Yeah, because when I feel like the word curvy, I'm like, you would never use that to describe me. I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I mean, well.
We're still in a group, I don't know.
I mean, I think some of the things that stood out to me that I chose not to respond to were how some of the words, not even regarding paper, but like were very genderized in the sense of like, usually when we talk about somebody who's commanding, right? Women are bossy, sassy, shrill, right? But men are like confident and all that stuff, whatever. So
Strong.
yeah, and so I purposely just was like, I'm not even going to assign that because I know what those words are.
Your question about words for body image, are there more negative ones for women than
Or even just more negative than
Probably all.
positive for women in general. And also words like strong, I mean, are we talking about mentally strong, physically strong? I mean, you know, and then usually it's applied differently in the women also.
Yes.
when did you think the word started to matter to the kids? What age do you think the word, or we started using the word to the kids?
Really?
Before they're born.
Gender
Yeah.
is part of it.
The first body was in the high school, that's, those are the words we use. Elementary.
You know, having two daughters, I know we were hearing bossy at very young ages, long before they started school.
Both of our children.
I'm not sure I find that.
That's not just pointed out to me. Clearly my children in many ways.
Well, sometimes kids are being bossy, whether they're boys or girls.
Right.
They're
What
not
do
be- just being confident, they are just bossy people.
Do you call the boy boss?
Yeah, I would.
You do?
But usually more at, let's say, a boy, a child. But
Yeah.
by the time he's an
Yeah.
adult and he's in a position of authority, then it's not bossy, it's being a strong leader or a good manager or
Authoritative.
authoritative.
That's interesting that there are words that sometimes have a positive connotation for one gender and a negative connotation for the other, depending on how you're placing it or the context you're using it. But most people wouldn't say bossy to an adult man, but they would to a woman. But there are words that you could use for both people, but it's positive for one and very negative for the other.
example? I'm trying to think through what.
Good
An idea?
example,
Yeah, I think this is true.
someone
but I-
used about me and I couldn't quite decode it. They described me as being intense. Because of-
That's a great, that's a great example.
Is that, and would that mean something different if I were a different gender?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, intense is
I've
good.
asked men who've told me you're too intense. It scares people. It's intimidating. I've asked when they say the word intense, like, well, what do you mean by that? And it almost always is synonymous with you're being bossy, bitchy,
Assertive.
assertive,
Aggressive.
too smart.
Not so
Another
nice.
example might be-
You're intimidating.
Right.
You're intelligent.
And
With that
driven,
resemblance.
ambitious, is sometimes considered a negative, but a driven man is successful.
Another was when someone tell a boy that you just smile. Yeah.
So, I started out at Educon yesterday morning in your classroom.
Yeah.
And there's a sign in her classroom that I may have to sneak over and take a picture of before I leave that says words mean something. And that's not there's 3 words on there and yet there's so much there. And sometimes it's so clear and then sometimes with like someone telling you you're intense, it's not clear what they mean by that word. And as a result, we manage sometimes at least to hide behind words. And to hide our biases behind words. Sometimes from the person we're talking to, and sometimes even from ourselves. This is a way to deny that I'm sexist or racist or whatever it may be if I use this language. I'm still saying this, but I can say it in a way maybe that lets me hide behind that language.
You have thoughts on that?
Jen?
Oh, I was just gonna say real quick, as somebody who does know both of you, I really started attributing some of the player stuff to Michael. And because I know him, I was like, okay, well, he's definitely he has his moments, and like the word dependent, for example, like he mentions all the time how dependent he is on his wife.
Yes.
Oh yeah, like, dependence versus Jen. I'm sorry, but sorry.
Oh no.
She does her own thing. Right? But then there were moments where like I'm sorry, what your name was Christine. Like I skipped over at least a good 3 or 4 words, but I don't find you any different as far as like being passionate, as being those sorts of words too. So I mean, I think a lot of this has to do with the relationships you have and the reframing that you constantly take as you're doing this like implicit bias, right? Because on the test, like you don't know the people who are on the screen. But in this case, we know like some of us know the people, so we're like, oh well, this is gonna be a little different than this test.
In a more specific, just gender issue.
But it does make you think about how, or at least in me, how I use those words about people I don't know or people I think I know.
Right.
Jen, what were you gonna say?
Just gonna say like how it's also like goes the other way in terms of words being years of prejudice and value of humanity, right? And so it's like if you think about all the words that for disability that have the society's gone through or different racial and ethnic groups, like we could make up a new term today for a oppressed group out of deep respect and love, and within a week a segment of our society would be using it sarcastically, right? And so I think about that in the context of what they just said in terms of how relationships form, and if the first programmed reaction by someone with relative power to oppress in society is sarcasm and hatred and dehumanization, they're probably not going to form any authentic relationships there that would help diffuse that. And so, I mean, then when I think of the classroom, like, where does that rank in terms of teaching that skill? Where does and unteaching that dehumanization? Where does that rank compared to, say, deconstructing the authors, or how does it relate to it, right? Because and I keep beating this drum, but like teaching at tiny, quote unquote, tiny schools, like we're always getting the failure label, but the people destroying the country, where were they all educated? Clearly, we're not educated within these skills at Harvard or at Madrid or wherever.
Right. Thinking back to where Jen started with the idea that we could come up with a more inclusive word or a word that would be more positive. And not only, I think, would you start seeing people take it sarcastically and hurtfully, but even those words that start out positive often get co-opted over time. Even if the intention is positive, you end up, I think back over 20 years in education, words that I've used to describe students that 15 years ago were a reasonable way to describe students that I would never say now. Because over time, that word has become a label for things that are, and I wonder how many of those words we just looked at didn't carry the baggage at one time that they carry now.
But they still be for that person, right?
I just wonder if it's something that's evolved.
Or just maybe as a society, we're learning to be a little bit more sensitive to honoring people like with dignity rather than just accepting them for what they are.
So,
Because I think like I just, it's been interesting like growing up and seeing how like PC all of a sudden is like a thing and people's objection to it. But it's like, why are you objecting to something? Just because it's a norm doesn't make it right? So like just because words that we use are like socially acceptable. Was it socially acceptable because we were too lazy to like actually think about how they impact people, or like were they socially acceptable because they actually like gave dignity to people? Like one thing I think of often is like the use of horizontal, right? And so like that's socially acceptable when maybe my grandparents and stuff like that are here, but like that's really offensive. And so it's like it's things like that where it's just like, and you turn that into gender and stuff, right? Like how women were viewed and like what was available to us, what was acceptable for us. It's so like deeply rooted in our society. So like now we're just calling it out. And so
I agree. I think it's really important to have a discussion with people and how they want to be addressed. And I taught at a university the last 2 years, and I had only one student share his gender pronouns with me. But no one ever talks about how they want to be addressed if it's their gender, it's their race, and it makes it, but people are uncomfortable with that conversation, including me. I feel like we're all uncomfortable with that situation.
Nobody's more uncomfortable than white males.
yeah. And that is where we need to be.
Yeah, I think that uncomfortability.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm a modern language teacher in Spanish in particular, and in Spanish, if you know anything about Spanish, it's always agreeing with gender. And how in my Spanish 1 class we take one of the first couple of days and talk about that, and how that this is the way the language is, and while it's evolving in some places, it's still used this way, that you still have to choose a pronoun for what you identify as male or female.
And that's it.
And
That's all there is in the language right now, right?
Do the pronouns reflect masculinity or?
Yeah.
They do, okay,
Yeah.
so.
Well,
Every single one.
the same we've gotten pushback from teachers, especially ELA teachers. We say, well, you can't be referred to as they, theirs because you're one person. It just
Grammatically
doesn't,
incorrect.
right, it just doesn't work that way. And it's like, well, no, it can if you wanted to. What you do is just change.
Language is always.
Right, exactly, just change how you view it. And what's the big deal?
And go ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna say, I think in those moments it's helpful to share stories of struggle, right? So like, I've got a bunch of students. I teach special math, but I've got a bunch of students who show up during lunch to learn Japanese, and so there's very little, but there's some gendering in Japanese language, and so the youth will ask about that, especially a lot coming from Spanish language backgrounds. And so I'll talk about the feminist J-pop stars who started using male pronouns as a way to basically give a middle finger to those type of roles, and that way they can kind of see how we've sometimes, I don't push it necessarily, but organically it comes up often where they'll say, well, how would we do that in English? Or how would we do that in Spanish, Because then it's like, oh, people are making choices around language that are either complicit with oppression or fighting it, and I can do that too. I can make those choices.
But how powerful to make that explicit with kids, for them, because they may be starting to subconsciously see it.
Right.
But, I look at the conversations we've had, our oldest is 14 years old, and the conversations we've had with her whole life, that mean that she is hyper aware of language and what it says, and comes home some days at students and at teachers at different times because clearly they aren't being thoughtful about the language. So wow, to realize that there's power in it and you can use that power.
Can you talk a little bit about what is that conversation, or maybe both of you can speak to that? I'm guessing you're there sometimes. How, yeah, sure. How do you be an advocate of change? Because she is clearly in a privilege in that she's had two parents who have helped her to become rich. So what sort of things have been successful for her as a student in that situation?
I don't know how explicit we've been about that and how much it's just been supporting her when she's done it herself. She came home at the end of 8th grade, the next to last day of school. Her best friend was moving 3 hours south, and the next to last day was her last day. Last day of school was a short day, and so her parents were just going the next day. And a male friend, her best friend had said to a male friend, "Can I give you a hug goodbye?" And the male friend said yes, and she gave him a hug. And another male friend standing nearby was like, "Oh, stop being so rapey." And my kid came home enraged. I mean, first of all, she's like emotional because her best friend moving, but she spent that evening writing a letter. She's like, "Mom, I couldn't talk to him. I was too mad to talk to him." Okay, well, first of all, go you for recognizing that in that moment. That's not helpful, because I'm not sure I always recognize that. She wrote him a 1-page letter explaining why this was completely unacceptable and that language was damaging, and she took it to school the next day. I don't know that I've done anything. I mean, I'm sure we've modeled behaviors that set her up to be that person, but I don't think I explicitly said to her, "Why don't you write him a letter?" So my role in that moment was to be like, "Way to go, girl." Damn. So I don't know. I mean, and there's a difference between her and her sister. Her sister is 11, and her sister doesn't tend to speak up in the same way. Her sister also tends to hold it inside more. Like, the oldest doesn't hold anything inside. It is all on her shoulder, out there all the time. And maybe we need to have more explicit conversations with the younger one, because at 11, the older one would have said so much that the little one doesn't say. So that's an interesting question to think about.
How did the other student react when he got the letter?
I don't know that he read it in front of her, so I don't know.
Curious to see it, because it's admirable, but I know there's certainly there could be some backlash to that also. Getting back to some of our previous pronouns and adjectives.
Yeah.
I hope it works out.
Yeah, for her, it was the need to speak up, and whether or not that worked.
It did work because she needed to do it, and she felt like she could, and then she
was
did.
empowered to do it.
Yeah, it did.
What's to your point about explicitly going with the kids in the classroom? I'm a high school class, it's different than elementary. And at the beginning of the year, I say the words you can't say. Just a little background. My mom cussed like a sailor. The one word we could not say at home was crap. I still cringe because she didn't like the sound of it. So I go to class and I said you can drop the F-bomb as long as you're not using it as a weapon. But you can't say the D word, you can't say the G word, and they sit there and try to figure it out. And then we have a and we talk about context and it really, and I'm a science teacher, I have no business teaching them to have it. I use it, and if the principal asks, I'll just say this is what my opening exercise to get the note takes, because I think it makes the class a little bit safer. And if you keep at it, they catch me, and I'm pretty easy to catch, but I'm still working on it. But if you give the kids permission, and they're later ahead of me, and but it might just be that the knees need to die off, and the younger people, no, I'm serious. No, it's true. Well, that's true too. But your implicit bias that your daughter, I'm just amazed that someone got.
Right. Well, and I'll be honest, I'm not convinced that as she ages, that will remain true. I think part of it is she had only had 11 years to be socialized, and I had 41. And I think over time, society, like when I listen to the radio and they say, we're going to speak to Dr. So-and-so about blah, blah, blah. And when a woman's voice comes on, there's a cognitive dissonance for me. Yeah, I've got issues with sexism. I immediately assume with doctor and expert ideas that it's going to be a man. So I don't know, maybe over time she will end up more, but maybe not. Maybe the youth really are not going to become us, which would be great. So as Michael and I planned this, having only met in person once before this conference this weekend, it was really interesting to recognize talking about issues of gender as a man and a woman in our planning. And so this is from one of our emails, and I'll let you explain.
No, it was more recent than it should have been. And we're both in a panic, and I talked to my wife, and I said, and Jen had set up a Google file with all these documents. And it's a few days before, and I'm looking at it, and I realized Google tells the other person when they open the documents. So I'm sitting there, hitting the buttons, I'm reading them as fast as I can. I didn't want to lie to her, so I'm reading the article, and then I'm in the middle of this, I'm talking, and again, my wife, we're right across from each other, but she's doing her work, I'm doing mine. And then the letter comes up from Jen. Damn it, she saw that what's going on. And this is, she said, she wrote a letter, I feel guilty because I've done so little that I'll get over that. And my wife said, damn it, I would have said the same thing, but it's something I shouldn't be saying. And Jen has some really interesting, that's why she feels guilty. And to be fair, I was feeling guilty at this point.
Yeah, that was a joint, yeah.
Because I've done so little when she's already that she did by far the bulk of the work at that point. And then it gets better. She then says, I'll get over that because she's worried about how I feel that she feels guilty because she didn't do it. It's just, it was.
Which for the record was not a conscious thing on my part.
No. And I wouldn't have been conscious about it, but I read it to my wife, and she's constructive about that. Wow, you're right.
So it's interesting to kind of realize how metacognitive this process had become for the two of us. All right, you ready for this part?
I think we're ready.
All right. So thinking about gender in kind of the rituals in our daily lives.
So there are 400 square inches that Jen has to deal with, and 10 square inches that I have to deal with. And most women do it. Most men at this conference have 10 square inches instead of maybe 100 square inches. Maybe not quite. And to give you the clue, I'm at the age where I have to do this to it as well. But I never asked you. Do you shave your legs?
Actually, I have bleeding my legs, so I do it far less frequently.
And then look at the way we're
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I forgot I literally just added this in the last session and I didn't even tell Michael. When you share slides, you do whatever you want. I tweeted out yesterday how astounded I have been at Educon and how many men have beards. And I have not felt that way in previous years in the last decade that I've been attending Educon. And fabulous beards. Like, okay, Zach doesn't always have a beard. That's a great beard Zach has right now. And so I tweeted this out, and several people have responded to me and been like, I know. And so someone else was like, we need a hashtag Beards of Educon. I was like, yes, we do. That's my new favorite hashtag. And now I want all the men at Educon who have beards to take selfies and post them with Beards of Educon. But as I'm having this conversation, when I should be listening to Zach and Diana, I can be honest. it occurred to me, like, am I now doing to men what has been done to women for generations? I don't know, it was an interesting kind of, and I don't know that that would have occurred to me if I didn't know, oh, Michael and I are about to talk about this. So, so if you have a beard, I'd love it if you took a selfie and posted it with a hashtag. Exactly, objectify
Nobody
your
else
face.
has.
I know, no one has. Someone needs to start it, BJ.
It's not shaving for 4 or 5 days.
What were you saying, Christina?
I was just like, it's interesting because when we talk about beards, we automatically assume that men have beards, and especially because in society, women are supposed to be hairless. And I don't have a beard, but I know that there are women who are just generally hairier, and they have beards that some people decide that they don't want to do anything about it because of religious things or whatever, and some people decide that they do. And so it's just interesting how even in this, as we're talking about beards at Educon, we're only talking about the men, but not considering the women.
Right.
And then what is our reason?
And I love that you said
And I'll just add, what about individuals who are transitioning?
Right.
Where does that fall? I don't know, the whole thing makes me a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like,
What
I
does
don't
it-
get
yeah.
it. Like, I don't understand why one person would be attracted to someone else's facial hair and then wanting to tweet about it.
I took it different. I took it from a political point of view, but this is an identifier. If I shave here and go to South Jersey, it's an identifier. I'm now right wing pickup Trump supporter. As long as I have this here, no, seriously, as long as I have this here, it puts me.
No, I believe you.
Yeah, so it's going to, I can see, and I see a beard and I say, oh, it's probably from my tribe, and it's just a. But then, yeah, with Christine brought up, like, oh, that's something.
You turn the beard
all of a
down
sudden,
enough, it becomes an evil beard as opposed
Right.
to a friendly beard or
So,
something.
yeah,
Well, but also too, okay, so we tweeted out the beards of Educon, we're kind of laughing about it. What if we tweeted out the boobs of Educon about the women?
Right.
How offensive would that be? And it is.
well, beards aren't sexual.
Well, but
Wow.
we're sort of objectifying
Breasts
it.
aren't always
Right, right, yeah.
But the beard is a choice.
But think about high school and how for boys who can grow a beard, like what things.
Yes.
I do think that it matters is that there's not the history of identifying men or like a history of them having this power. Well, like I agree that there's probably some things that like it's totally done in testament to equality, but like I agree there's some things that are problematic. It is not the same as figuring out time. Like this is totally like with the history there.
Because again,
This actually, I'm not I've said it so many times already, but Irish and I have no chin. So this is so men can use them to hide things, and it's not seen as oh he's hiding something. It's oh he has a beard. It's just that if women were doing something to hide, then we were immediately aware that they're hiding something. Not that you
Or
go here.
makeup.
yeah,
For example.
right.
I think the thing that I keep coming back to is that you're taking away other people's choices and you're taking away their agency of themselves when you objectify anybody. And I totally agree that the historical pieces are so crucial. But if what we're saying is we're all trying to grow and to learn how to figure out these things together, then I think we can't do something to another group of people that we wouldn't want done to ourselves, because ethically, it's still the same thing. Like in this very moment, I'm still doing something to somebody, and I don't know if, I don't think we should be taking that privilege and putting, whether it's your beard or your, I think that that's just prevalent right now, that we're in this time and place where, well, if I like Eric's shirt, I can just take a picture of Eric's shirt and post it on Twitter. Like, excuse me, Eric might have a million things that make him uncomfortable about that. I need to go and say, Eric, I love your shirt, connect with him as a human, and then make it about, I'm so glad I got to meet you. Your shirt has now like brought us together. And also I love your shirt, can I take a picture of it? But you have to start from that place of
somebody
humanity.
chooses to wear a particular message on the shirt, that's a personal choice, and they're advertising basically. If they didn't want that message out there, they wouldn't wear the shirt.
It's not so much for me about the message as like this is something that I am wearing. This is my personal space. This is
my
me, and
body.
this is my body, my choice. It's
And that line of logic
Also,
does not end
just-
well.
just to your point, we had a few couple of years when we were playing board, and we didn't have as much choice as you might think on what t-shirt we were wearing.
And that would be true for the
So,
majority of my
Yeah,
students.
so it's,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a choice, but, and this is a choice. for everyone.
And even
But
with
when I was a
that,
kid, I didn't have that choice.
the message might be, okay, it's okay for here. Like I'm sort of like with my tribe, it's okay. I don't necessarily want someone, who I don't know looking at it and then making a judgment about me based on what shirt I'm wearing. Just to carry, to another degree.
Right.
Yes, I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion around consent that is going through this. I do want to highlight, I think we need to be careful about making the checklist of individual decisions that will help fight these broad social forces, right? So it's like, I think when we look at, I think the Beards of Educon is a great example of how we can't, a person or group of people can't invent a novel thing as humor and have it completely separate from vast social forces of oppression and sexism, the like. And so I think there's tons of insight that have been given in the follow-up to it as to making an individual choice to participate, why it would be bad or good. But and I think there were some interesting things about the difference between taking a picture of your own beard and tweeting it is a response to some social pressure to do it versus running around snapping shots of people's beards, right? But that being said, I think we could, again, make up a random hashtag that has something to do with Educon, and we know it's going to be infused with sexism and racism and classism to some degree, right?
Because it's unavoidable in our society at this moment.
Right, and that's not a surrender, that's we need to organize and smash things that are bad, right?
Recognize it to be able to stand against it.
And who's wearing the beard? So
Yeah.
who precisely is wearing the beard?
Exactly.
And then how do people respond to the person wearing the beard? Because that also ought to be analyzed a little more deeply. Because if if it's a job, I get it, but like, and not just because of you, but like, I think we all kind of agree it's a nice beard.
It's part of the professorial.
And that's all well and good, but then, let's say someone else wants to wear it because they're not conforming, or if it's somebody who people aren't necessarily attracted to, they don't like, then it becomes a whole other situation that we need to analyze thoroughly.
Yeah, I guess I was gonna make a similar point, is that if people here at Educon were to take pictures of their beards and then they're up, then people start judging them and I think that was a different.
So, this is on my shelf. When I get up to get ready for school, I put out my speed step. And hour. Say active ingredients of it, just going to have the latest speed step is only 10%, 16%. But focuses on just that's what my wife says. This is where I'm appears. This is just I there's things I just didn't notice until so no. I cheated on this. I do wear this is my outfit. It's not the same jeans every day, it's not the same t-shirts. It is mostly the same sweater. I just wear sweaters every couple of weeks. So I told Jen, I said, this is how I really feel. So she's telling me she feels comfy. 3 weeks ago, I said, take a picture every day and we'll compare how we dress because women have to present themselves a specific way and much less latitude. They have more variety, but less latitude than men who pretty much come in and go, well, this is my building, any way they want. So that's Jen's Monday outfit, my Monday outfit. That's Jen's Tuesday outfit. The Wednesday outfit. Friday outfit. The only thing that changes is the colors of the shirts. And my room is extremely cold. That's my classroom. But that is, that's, so we discussed it. And again, yesterday, we're sitting together, and I noticed her nails. And commented on her nails.
And we had a conversation about the fact that the me that you see at this very moment is not the me you can see every day. When I come to a conference like this, which takes me slightly out of my comfort zone, this is not my classroom. This is not my family, in the biological sense. There are certain things I do, and one of them is that I paint my fingernails. My fingernails are never painted. And yet for people who've only seen me at conferences, you would assume my fingernails are always painted. I wear makeup. That is not a daily thing. That is I need armor on this day. I need, to know that what I'm presenting is the best I can present. And whereas Michael, of course, is like, nope, this is how I go to school every day. So it was an interesting thing. And a data set of 2 does not get you a whole lot. This could be my own personality versus Michael's personality. It could be that he's got 20 years on me. And
as an age, but not in years.
In age. And so, maybe he's past a threshold of age where he just doesn't have to care, and I haven't yet. So it may not all be about gender, but I do think there is, even as I look around the room at the ways people are dressed, it's interesting to compare. I think there is a societal expectation for women about how we present ourselves.
I think the principal would say something who won't get in just like this. I do.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I want to say also, I kind of do the same thing you do though. Like as a male, I'm wearing of the 3 days of the conference, I wore my 3 best shirts.
Right.
And even during the school year, we have those spirit weeks where you dress up with the kids to be, with the crowd, but be supportive. And there are those days where I'm wearing a t-shirt and jeans, and I am just uncomfortable. Yeah. I very much prefer to be in similar attire to this. And I made the same analogy, I guess my chinos and button down is my armor.
Right.
Help me separate myself, help me have that more hierarchical position above things.
To help me feel like the person I need to be in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's not fully gendered.
No, I don't think it is.
I don't know, I started teaching a long enough time ago that I remember there being specific dress requirements for men and women in schools. And they were usually far more restrictive for women than for men.
Well, if I was going to say, even with dress codes for our students, historically, this dress codes for the female students was much more stringent, and often the rationale was because you're distracting the boys.
Still.
Yeah, not as much, but yes, certainly still
But
there.
our elementary daughter, as early as 2nd or 3rd grade, would say, I can't wear this dress to school because the straps aren't wide enough.
Right.
Are you kidding me? You're 7.
Mhm. Yep.
It's infuriating to me.
Just that, it's still like that. I mean, I'm not in school anymore, but yeah. I think just in our society, when you look at an interview situation, what is appropriate for a man to wear versus what a woman wears, and what that message is, and I think there's so much variability of what a woman could wear to an interview versus what men typically wear to an interview, and then how that's perceived.
Our dress code is actually
For
teachers, more restrictive for men because our building has air conditioning that never works. So we have men who have to wear slacks every day in 100-degree classrooms, and women are wearing short, skirts and things so that they can breathe. And it's actually during those hot months, it's really interesting to hear and to have conversations with the men in the building about that kind of role reversal that I have.
This reminds me of an article I read earlier this year about bus drivers in a city somewhere in the world had
Versus
had a dress code, and the females, they were during the heat wave of the summer, so the female bus drivers could wear skirts to be more cool. and the men were required to wear pants the entire summer. But they figured out eventually the dress code just said skirts and pants. It didn't say anything about men not having being required to wear pants. So eventually came out that the men just started wearing skirts on their routes.
That's beautiful.
That also happened in Ireland, or I don't know, maybe somewhere in the UK, where it was a prep school where the guys wore skirts. Yeah. It was last summer.
I mean, in
So
some
hot.
cultures, it's like in Indonesia, like they wear salons.
Right.
So that's like a normal thing, you know, and so, I don't know. Different parts of the world, just certain things that we think are genderized here.
Right. There's a cultural piece that changes that, I think, which is really fascinating. Yeah.
I think it's also getting a lot into like adults inflicting and taking away agency away from youth to compensate for our own mistakes, you know? And so it's like, oh, there's gang activity in the neighborhood. Well, we're not going to provide jobs or anything like that, but we are going to take away people's right to wear clothes, right? And then, you know, naturally that's going to disproportionately impact female students rather than male students or transgender students. And I mean, at my last middle school, we had a strong student social justice organization, and like one of the big points of friction with the administration was dress code. And we got to a point where the administration had given on all sorts of other things, but the students were literally saying, like, students going through our period do not want to wear white slacks under any circumstances. And the admin was saying, well, the local school council has an idea about style that and the image of the school, and that white slacks look better, so too bad, you know.
Not after Labor Day.
Well, and I would argue, knowing teenage girls who are learning to cope with having their period, that white slacks that have been bled on are probably not the image they wanted.
Right. Well, and you know,
But yeah.
and cutting nurses from every school, so there's not necessarily that. I mean, we provided it, but not necessarily the strong health education that needs to happen at that age.
Right. I have a student who I taught him in kindergarten, I'm teaching him again in third grade, and every year he's been in school, okay, 1, 2, 3. Somebody at home has chopped his hair off really, really short, and he hates it. It is a traumatic experience every time it's happened. And when I had him in kindergarten, it meant that in like April, he started wearing a winter cap every day to school and wouldn't take it off. Wouldn't take it off at recess as he's running around and he's sweaty, and wore it literally until the end of the year. And the first day he wore it, I said, you need to take your hat off. No. And he was so upset, and I just thought, why do I care? What is my issue with him wearing a hat? And so he wore the hat. And I had to have conversations with every specialist he saw, PE, music, art, librarian, everybody. I had to have conversations with my administrators who were like, he needs to take the hat off. Why? Why is this an issue? Like, I can see his face. I don't understand. And it's been a battle every year. And he got back to me again in third grade, and they did it this year in the fall, and he's been wearing a hat now for 2 months. I don't care. But again, I have to go to bat with my administration, even my school social worker. She's like, there's clearly an underlying issue. Great, let's address the underlying issue. Why are we fighting the hat? Why doesn't he get the agency to make this decision? It's not endangering anyone, it's not. And so I think one of the things that keeps happening with the choices we make for students is that we don't ask why. We keep doing, this has been our dress code for years, so it continues to be our dress code without any thought of, well, why is that our dress code? And it's hard to ask why about everything, and actually not reasonable about everything, but I think the more that we do that, the more we would begin to recognize the bias that exists in the structures in place in our schools. But this could be a factor too.
About 3/4 of the teachers in public high schools in the United States are women, and only about 1 in 5 are superintendents in school public schools. And it hasn't been the women only recently flooded the workforce for teachers. Women have traditionally been. It's always out there.
Right, as we, as we kind of think about big societal issues, and then actually what does that mean within our profession? And then for children, what does it mean that we're an overwhelmingly female profession and overwhelmingly male leadership?
If anybody has found a Android phone in a purple case, please bring it to the main office. Thank you so much.
That's not even.
Should we make assumptions? Based on purple case, who's not?
Well, according to,
We're in this beautiful purple sky.
well, according to the pie chart, that would be a match.
Do what?
Right.
According to the pie chart, purple is match.
Oh, I know, so is this lavender or is it what?
But you're thinking about, teaching being overwhelmingly female. It's only, and for most of the time, it was female in the elementary and lower grades. It was very heavily male in the high school because they were the subject matter experts. And that's what we teach in high school is subject matter expert stuff. So I mean, that's changed, in the last 20 years or so. It's very heavily weighted towards
Science and math departments
Still
is
male.
our school.
Although I taught math for 18 years, and my department chair was a woman, my principal was a woman, and most of the department were women, so they taught me a lot.
Jeff, what's the ratio in higher ed, do you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Especially for
it's
tenure
about,
track positions,
for
for male, female.
For professors in general, it's actually close to 46 female to male. But in presidents, university presidents, it's I mean, in public liberal arts colleges, it's actually 50-50. But in overall, I think it's like 1/3, 2/3 female to male.
I guess.
Yeah. But a lot of that is in the last 10 years.
Right. And I wonder how that plays out when you then begin to look at, I think back to the elementary school I worked in for 16 years, had a very light teaching force for a very diverse school. And it was something that I always felt we needed to work on, but if you walked into the building, you wouldn't immediately realize that because almost all of our instructional assistants were people of color. That is not as true at my current school where we have a more diverse teaching force and a less diverse instructional assistants. But I do wonder then in higher ed, what if we, beyond the tenure track professors, what if you look at the people who are in contract positions teaching or, do we end up with more women in those roles?
I'd love to see some sort of study comparing also socioeconomic neighborhoods. Are the higher socioeconomic neighborhood schools more male, more whiter?
That is an interesting question.
But I mean, I'd like to see something
That would be.
So John and I teach at the same school, and we had these monthly meetings that we had to have because the school was failing. And all the experts would come in. Yeah, and there would be 20 people, right? There would be 20 people sitting around the table. And mostly women. Out of the 23 of them were men. And all 3 of those men, well, 2 of the 3 of those men had the highest position. And the one presenting at that particular time was a male. And there was a lot of really smart people in that room. And as he was presenting, the person from central office was like, "This is really good. Did you do this?" And he was like, "No, this was the team. The team did this." And the person from the central office was like, "No, but who crunched the numbers? Who did this data? You crunched the numbers, right?" And it was just like,
I'm glad I understood all of these.
it was like, really? 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 But it really, yes, really.
Well, as we were exchanging kind of resources and thinking through things, one of the ones was the recent study about conversations at the Supreme Court and who was interrupted more. And if you haven't looked at that, you should totally Google that and check out. I mean, the Supreme Court, where first of all, lawyers can't interrupt the justices, although you'll notice in the report that that's happening. But it's really an interesting look. If you're not familiar with XKCD, totally worth checking out. Okay, how often is this true? That when we look at somebody with male and we make a statement, it's about that individual. And when we look at a woman or other groups, it becomes a blanket statement. You know, I'm taking you as representative of all. All right, so we wanted to spend some time talking even more. And Michael pulled some images of kids and teachers. And just want to see kind of, what do you notice about this? Because these are the images our kids are seeing all the time. So what are they learning? What are they taking in from these? Michael, can you go back? Jen's got to see.
All girls have long hair.
It's shockingly hard not to find pink for a daughter, if you remember to try.
And flowers.
Father's Day.
I got that shirt in the '70s.
I don't think that's a gender issue, honey.
No.
I don't know why this is striking to me, but I feel like the two girls are, like, I'm counting the number of things they're carrying and it seems the same, but the girls, it looks like maybe the things that they're carrying aren't made for them. Like her backpack looks ginormous. And this boy over here is just like, I'm good, let's go to school. I don't know, that's just something
He
that
looks loose in some way.
Yeah,
And it's just a little bit more chaotic, which I think is this like boyish.
Yeah, the disheveled.
Hair sort of disheveled.
I'm really blown away by some of the size of the backpacks I see kids wearing anyway.
But I wonder if
He has a really big book.
He's a very big book.
Right?
I wonder why we assume that's a boy, because I
Right.
could definitely see my daughter
Yeah.
looking like that.
I was thinking the same thing.
That's a
Maybe because his pants are the darkest.
Of the three of them.
Yeah, it's the darkest color clothing that there is. That's us, right?
I remember when my daughter was in second grade and she went through a phase and she wore all black and gray. And she had little sneakers with skulls on them.
Small hands.
And now she has short hair and she works as at a karate school, like helping take care of the kids. And the little, like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds said to her, why is your hair like that? And she's like, what do you mean, why is my hair like that? They're like, like that. Like, why don't you have like more hair? You're a girl, right?
I've noticed, our oldest she sings. She has sung in women's choirs through middle school and high school. And at the last few concerts, there are 2 all-women choirs at her high school. One of the freshmen mostly, and then one of more upperclassmen. The long hair thing is unbelievable. And it means that I look at those girls who do have short hair and I think, I'm so impressed with you. Like, as a teenager, you are willing to be who you want to be in a way that is so visibly different from your peers. And I don't think I had realized it before until I'm looking at a group of girls who are all dressed exactly the same. And so the different hairdos stood out. One of the things Michael said to me was, look how much harder the parents have to work for the girls' hair. And I thought, oh God, when my children were younger, it used to be that they would take a bath and wash their hair every other day. And they would get out of the bathtub and I would brush their hair and I would French braid it so that we didn't have to touch it again until we took another bath. Because I didn't want to deal with it every day. And the 11-year-old doesn't do anything with her hair. She gets out of the bath, shower now, and she just goes. And it looks absurd, and I don't care. I don't care. If she doesn't care, why do I care? Why do I need to say to her, no, you're not presenting well, you need to brush your hair?
Right, you don't, but there are others who.
My mother has given my children 3 for years over the back. And it was when the oldest hit middle school that she started brushing her hair. There was a peer society pressure.
Grief or gives you grief?
Mostly the kids. She gave me grief as a child about my hair, plenty. But yeah, we don't even think a lot about some of these things that are there. And then what about the messages we send them about us?
I went down a rabbit hole with this.
This is fun though.
I want to see,
there we
I want
go.
to see.
No,
those people
No,
change.
I was interested with the
Yeah.
conversation. How many, who's more likely to abuse kids, male teachers or female teachers? And if we read the Daily News, when it's a female, I started looking at the pictures. The female is showing about shot, and then they always show the beauty shot. And guys, they don't get the beauty shot. You don't really hear much about the guys, but every time a woman, it's unfortunately it's fairly common, but it's just the way we view the women in the profession. We almost took this out. I'm not even sure why we're showing this one.
Because kids see it and it sends them messages.
When you say kids see it, I'm sorry, have you seen this image? Same image you're talking about, or a female teacher in front of you?
This image.
Like
Yes.
this
yes.
image or the like sexy teacher image is out there.
Right.
You don't see the sexy male teacher much.
I'm sorry,
No, I was just gonna say, well, it's an important image in that the profession is dominated 75% by white women, and there is an over-sexualization of the position as is. And when I look at the New York Post, for instance, like they love stories where like the white women have found, you know, some boy student, and usually it's a boy student of color, who they just happen to pay upon, right? Like, and they never try to analyze it in any sort of way, like try to look at, you know, what it means to rape, for instance, what it means to sexually assault. And they never talk about like the top-down hierarchies that allow for our profession to be dominated in one way, shape, or form. Like we don't go into those policies. Instead, it's like, oh look at the way that this plays out, and look at the way it plays out in, I guess, people's sexual fantasies and perversions or whatever have you. So the questions that we all have to tackle, because it's at the underbelly of our profession when we don't talk about it.
Versus this image.
It's always math and science, a very authoritative figure. How about a male figure leading a choir or something?
Which has been actually the majority of the leaders of choirs. My child is second have been male. This one is interesting because they're in the same setting.
But they're both white.
And they're both white.
Oh.
Yes, overwhelmingly white.
Oh, okay.
They really.
Pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's something we ought to be stepping back and noticing as well. What are you thinking?
all these teachers have. Yeah. And I understand also when you Google certain things, like I did a career day for marine biology and we're trying to find the scuba diver of color. It was so hard to find. Even a scientist of color, like a clip art of it was hard to find. Then your Google searches, I'm just gonna add that are like a little bit odd, right? Like teaching a family unit right now in Spanish 1, and the Google searches are like non-white family. And it's like, why can't just diversity just?
Why can't we just, yes, I do, I find myself trying to game the algorithm. What's the way that I word this so that I find that tiny slither that's on the internet that actually fits what I'm looking for when it comes to a more diverse.
Yeah, just search for CEO or professor, just put that one word in, put it on Google search. See what you see.
I typed in teacher into Google image search right now.
Yes.
First image is I'm guessing elementary, just have the type of map on the board. Elementary school teacher, who is a woman of color. The second one is the neat image of an Asian teacher pointing at something on the board and at the student. And then two more Asian teacher, female Asian teacher.
Okay, I do have one question for you.
Yeah.
Are you both logged into your Google accounts? Then
That's
it's,
tailored.
right, so it's tailoring to what it's to you, and previous searches you've done. So I wonder, I always think that when I do a search on Google, like, what would happen if I did this with not with me?
Go.
I think this fits in, but I also just wanted to share, so if I'm doing that thing, shut up. But so also when you look at images of teaching excellence, the Illinois State Teaching Award, their flyer is like 2 of their previous white winners, and then that Asian teacher meme, and then the first image you get if you Google black woman teacher, and that's their flyer, like. And so like, I think, I mean, we could do like 6 sessions on like teacher awards and stuff like that and identity, but I think it fits in a lot to this sort of community.
Yeah.
Like how even terms like teaching excellence, like exacerbate a lot of these differences.
And to some extent, I want to say, we've made this tiny step forward in that if you Googled that 20 years ago, I think you would have had a group of white teachers. So we at least are now stepping forward to say, this is not acceptable. We're just like doing a good job of it. Which in some ways is hugely offensive. Like, look, we actually have really great white teachers, but for everybody else, we should take a look. We need to Google. Did it change when you did it incognito?
No, it didn't actually.
Oh, good. That's fascinating. Okay.
But can I just speak to that too?
Yeah, please.
Because I feel like when we see pictures, we're like, oh, okay, and then we just think that it's gone. But like people are being more and more aware of like how diversity is like sexy. So like they get people to just put those images so that you're not thinking about the actual system. So like just because we might be in incognito and these pictures like post up doesn't actually like mean shit, you know?
My first picture was from Rand.com, which is a Rand corporation.
Yeah. So, and I mean, we can flip the script. One of the top images when you search teacher is a borderline racist meme of an Asian American teacher, right? I mean,
yeah.
Well, yeah, and to just sort of build on what you're saying, I think, you know, I mean, we've had this problem at my own institution where when we sort of do the advertising, the marketing for the school, we very intentionally, I think, and often with good intentions, you know, include a diverse population of students, diverse population of faculty, but it's such that our faculty of color said, I'm happy to be in things if you're asking me to be in things because of my status, because of the work that I've done as a faculty member, but I'm not interested in being a token anymore, right? And so if you have that happening all over, and I think you do, then these images start to show up, but you're right, they don't actually reflect real things. They are.
Like my friend was reflecting on the women's march that she went to in Delaware, and it was so interesting because she was saying how like most of the people that it was like in Utah, so like or Del State, but like most of the people that showed up were older white women. But then because there was a group of them that were connected to one of the speakers, I guess like somebody from the newspaper was like, oh my gosh, it's so great. You have like some Asians, like a black person, like 2 hijabi women, and like this Mexican American. And so we're just gonna snapshot this picture and post it. And this is like supposed to represent the Women's March in Delaware, when it's actually not. Like,
when I can picture the Women's March in Delaware.
Right, and then, you know, to add on to that, it's not so much, our focus, to say our foci ought not to be on how diverse any one population is, but whether or not they're allowed to bring their power into a conversation. So thinking to the Women's March, right? Like, what's the difference between saying, okay, it's just going to be a Women's March versus saying, oh, we're actually going to bring in Muslim women, African American women, we're going to bring in indigenous First Nations women, right? Like, what are the priorities in communities that look different from what we would consider normal, which again ought to be deconstructed and, as Shane would say, destroyed. So, and then I think about like just the profession itself. So 2016, and there is going to be a write-up. So somebody's going to write it up. I might be the last person, but the 2016, Johanna Hayes was the National Teacher of the Year. Right?
Yes.
We had Nate Bowling, Sean Sheehan, and Daniel Jocks, and it was the most diverse cadre of National Teachers of the Year nominees that we've had perhaps ever. But what we learned was in 2017 and 2018 was that we went right back to being all white because 2016 was so relatively radical. I mean, Johanna Hayes was talking about mass incarceration. She'd been the first national teacher to go to a prison I said, I'm gonna work with the kids there, and Nate Bowling is who he is, like, he's a monster as far as I'm concerned. So Thompson had decides to run for office and then leave the state very loudly to say there are issues happening in Oklahoma where they are not paying me, and I was the national teacher of the league. I was a national teacher of the year candidate in this space, so I need to leave because y'all not giving me enough money. And so of course they learned from that. They said, oh, like we actually give them agency. That's a problem. Like so, it's not so much just like the color. It's also like the depth by which you bring folks along, and the same thing with gender too. Same thing with
how you use your voice.
Yeah, well, I would also say too, like
How your voice is welcomed.
even in New York City,
Requested.
like yes,
I
like
did.
have you heard like that we're trying not to fight for like full like maternity leave in New York? Like that's a big effing deal. And you would think, huh? Okay, so there are teachers now, and Rosie Fischella is one of them, and she helped organize like an anti-testing movement like in New York City as well. So she's real big here. But a couple of folks, led by women, decided that they were going to have more rights as far as full family leave. It first started off as let's just focus on maternity leave because it's a concern for so many of us who are burgeoning mothers. That was the thing. But then, of course, because of the politics or whatever, everybody said, okay, let's go with full family leave because that'll also include fathers and all that. But then it's like, okay, well, we ought to really be focused in on what Rosie over here is saying because at first this is a woman-led thing. So we ought to get behind this, and then everybody else has to benefit. But that shouldn't be the impetus for why like we get behind this because like there was a real serious issue, and women are doing the work. Like let's get behind it. Versus saying, oh, we're just gonna put women in this position, but we're gonna sort of voice of agency to create policy change, right? So those are like that's kind of what I'm trying to lean towards. And I want to see something happen in New York City, but what is gonna happen? At least we stand behind folks, not because it's diverse, but because they get agency and power behind that as well.
It is the last session and we are at the tip end. I am gonna stick this slide up just to say, these were, should we not have actually been talking to each other? Topics we thought might have been worth having a conversation about. Dress code, you noticed, did come up earlier. Children's literature is a really big thing. I just talked a series to my kids that I almost didn't do called Shark School because the shark is a hammerhead shark and he talks about how like that's the loser of the shark family and because it's so girly. And it's a tiny piece of the book, but I was like, really? How am I? So anyway, and then thinking about what we're saying, that came up some too about the ratios of teachers and things and administrators. But also then the role of the disciplinarian and what does that mean gender. So I guess our kind of our task as you leave would be to be thinking about what does this mean for us in our roles as professional educators and how do we help students kind of have these kinds of conversations and look at these images and listen to these words with a critical eye rather than just kind of a sponge taking in the societal expectations for all of us. Anything I'm forgetting?
Well, yes, but it's stupid.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact, we appreciate the fact that by the end of your time at Educon, you came in here and genuinely were so thoughtful and pushed our thinking and understanding. And so thank you so much for that.
See you.
I'll save someone's cell phone.
I know. You a good seat today. He was very excited, as I would have been.
We were debating.
Oh, yeah.
I know, that's so nice. Why not remember? That's your big thing.
By the way, dinner last night.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Well, it's
it's this little local place that we discovered a few weeks ago when our friends, boys, were playing their band. It's a little restaurant that has about 20 seats in the whole place. It's called Local Lakes. It's in town over. And I had a butcher come in twice a week. The guy's an ex-teacher, and we were talking one day when we left him there, and I said, "Oh, we live right here." Danielle and Carolina, who's our art teacher and married to our athletic president. Yeah, she's doing this. He goes, "Oh, well, we used to teach together. So like my best friends." In a small world. And he also runs a beer rhythm and blues festival. And it's all fresh. And on once a month on Saturday, there are 6 course tasting dinner. It's expensive because the regular stuff is so cheap. So we took our neighbor and best friend out there for his birthday. I got the bill for $150. But it was BYOB, and it was just a really cool little place. And we didn't know they had a local winery there, like one tasting. It really is, really is a cool place. It was nice, but
I did not go out to dinner and all that, and I'm fading.
I'm just gonna say goodbye.
Thanks. Yes. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry?
Oh.
It is one of my favorite places to be.
And you can dress up every.
Exactly. So much bigger than last year.
No.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be fine. So what is what we do? I mean, it's not gonna happen at my specific unfortunately, but in my classroom, it will happen. Yes, and of course,
I didn't realize
Oh, yeah.
the way you handle the head, I would do a pediatrician straight. There's no panic. You calm it down.
No, well, no, okay. Purified.
Oh, I really was, but I'm just.
Yeah.
Still little, but so much bigger than last year. Yeah. Yeah. No, but yeah, right.
I have to say, I felt super impressed.
Fun to see her talking around.
Nobody has ever
Right. No, exactly. Oh.
when you create tapping into my level, and they're like, "Man, it's not me." But I've never had anybody
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending Educon 2018. The conference center is now closed and we have to get on with the business of turning it back into a school. Thank you so much. If you like what you saw here, don't forget to register for the Summer Teaching Institute, and we will see everybody at Educon 2019. That's the way, kids. Please find Miguel and other folks so we can start taking all the furniture back up to this floor. And it'd be nice to help.
I'm not sure. I walked in there. What you doing? So I just did, and I think my guys were doing it, kids are doing it. I did that I.
Right.
But like, male, but I didn't get that conversation. White, it's nothing to the shade.
Yeah. Change, but it makes it a lot faster.
No, that's not a good thing. I don't know what to do with it. I'm a racist. I can give it to
What if we do a order franchise based on?
I love it. Order of franchisement based on something.
So, I mean, it's one of those things like, if dudes aren't allowed to vote at all, I mean, I lose my right to vote, but we have a much better society.
You mean non-white?
That was the corollary.
Yeah.
53%.
Yeah. Which, by the way, like, I keep hearing that 53%, it's like, we kind of let white men off the hook, though. Like, we expect them to be trash,
Right.
and constantly coming back to like, looking that way.
I had thought that, I'm like, I think there's a question, but the way men are screwed up even worse than us.
No, it's true.
That was the fucked up piece, isn't it?
I was gonna say the levels of suckiness, I don't know.
And this wasn't like just in favor of mass incarceration. Like this was a referendum on considerably more. So the massive levels of mass incarceration, that was the other candidate, right? So
Anyway, so, another. Yeah.
but no, was it 4 since you got on the board? 4 years since you got on the board and that?
Yeah.
Is that what it was? I was trying to remember.
Yeah. Christian, thank you. You should pop on my tickets.
I was gonna say, you think you put it out on the second part.
All right, I'm giving you a hug so you can go.
Bring it on in.
Delete my boy.
Absolutely.
Oh, he's so darling.
Yeah. And I totally feel bad for Jeff, because once you put the word curly up there, it's like.
I know.
Michael's not, he doesn't down like that. Like, sorry.
All right,
It's
you
not
didn't
about
have to
that
see Christina, did you?
Okay. But yeah, it's okay.
Me too. I still need to see Sarah, you can let us know.
Yeah, I might be there soon. Yeah.
Take you to dinner.
Yay.
Free meal.
I'm about that life too. So, you know, really great stuff. Apparently one person. This is the. She was walking away from a conversation I was having with her. And this was all. Actually, about it. What's her access? Frankly, our conversations around, yes, the union. Yeah. Well, of course, there was a little layer to that conversation too. When I went to Chicago, what was it? Man, it was when I went. What was the piece that I went? I know that I had asked you to go see Ken. Well,
That was when you were in New
yeah. Oh, right. That's
Yeah,
it.
we did the
Teaching from social justice, and also actually. That was the weekend that I remember the night before, there was some sort of like after party or whatever. And everybody was basically, oh, that's a big deal. And of course, he walks in the place and like, I see no nothing. Like, he's like, it's like, that is so fascinating. I mean, actually, I decided to sign off of that. Now, this kind of just adds layers to it. Really complicated.
yeah. How do we? I mean, and it's not enough, right? But I think about all the work we put in, like internally, to address societal garbage, right? And like, just with our structure and who can join and